On today's episode, I would like to share with you what I learned about creativity and making things on my recent trip to London. Hey there, welcome to the SweetGeorgia channel. I am Felicia from SweetGeorgia, and here on this channel we talk about color and craft, creativity, and the importance of making time to make things. Now, we just recently got back from a family trip that we've been planning for about 2 years now. My husband and I and our 2 kids, we've just been trying to find the right time to go. And I recognize that we are so lucky to have had this opportunity to travel with our kids. Right now they're aged 8 and 10, and we traveled with them to the UK this past July. Now, both my husband and I, we love London. It is one of my favorite places in the world. Now, we haven't been back for probably about 10 years. The last time we went, I went to go teach at Unwind in Brighton and brought my son. At the time, Russell was about 7 or 8 months old, and it was a time where we could sort of put him in a spot and he wasn't really going anywhere. So it was a very different experience than this time. Coming home from a trip to London, I feel like my brain is on fire. I think that the city of London is very busy, but it's also so vibrant. And it's the energy in that city that has brought me incredible inspiration over and over. This trip to London has been really re-energizing. So there are so many reasons that I love London, but one of the first is just that there's a lot of really good food. I had my fill of pie and mash, and so much pie and mash and baked goods and pastries and bread. And so I am coming home to do a little bit of a bread detox and reset right now. The other thing that I love about London is that there is this juxtaposition of history with modernity. So there's a mix of like really, really old and really, really new. The city doesn't stop evolving or staying within the aesthetic that has already been set. So it's not like all the new buildings and developments have to look like old buildings. It's constantly evolving. And so I love this idea that just because things were done in a certain way for a long time doesn't mean we need to get stuck in that phase. Things keep moving, things keep evolving, and things keep changing. I love that about the city and being able to see two things at the same time. As well, I've always felt that there's this underlying respect and appreciation in London and in the UK for craft and design and aesthetics. So there was one morning where we went to the Natural History Museum, and then in the afternoon we went to the V&A Museum, or the Victoria and Albert Museum. They are just next door to each other. And so I tried to explain to the kids that the Natural History Museum is kind of about life that is on the planet. It's rocks and it's plants and it's birds and it's all of the life that is on the planet. But the V&A is about the stuff that life on this planet has created. It's amazing to be in one space looking at how living creatures evolved on this planet, and then walking next door and seeing the incredible sculptures and statues and paintings and furniture and everything that we as living creatures conceived of and created with our own hands. There is one particularly big exhibit of locks and keys at the V&A that are all from around the late 1600s. And you think about locks and keys, and they're pretty practical items, but the beauty and the intricacy of the design and decoration of these particular locks and keys is amazing. They have scroll work, they have leaves, they're beautifully adorned and decorated and created. And who would do that? Who would spend so much time designing and making that? And so I feel like there was a question in here for myself about the value of time, the value of making things. What makes this a worthwhile way to spend time? I'm curious and I'm fascinated by the amount of effort that people put into designing and making things for no other reason other than they look beautiful because you want to. It's valuable and it's worthwhile because you believe it is. Now, in the V&A, I also wandered around from room to room. I searched online, tried to find some machine knitted socks. I wanted an example of some socks in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and I did. I managed to find 2 pairs of socks. One was made with a knitting machine using space-dyed yarn. Very, very exciting very, very exciting when I saw that. Now, my husband's pick for things to do was to visit the British Museum. And apparently there are over 8 million items in that museum. So the way I see it is, if the Natural History Museum is about living creatures, and then the V&A is about the things that living creatures designed and created, then the British Museum is about how all the things from all the different parts of the world can teach us about ourselves. So I found that in every culture there is some form of jewelry, which I think is really interesting, because it doesn't seem like it's a necessary or essential thing. Jewelry doesn't provide us with shelter or sustenance, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that it's necessary to our survival. But every culture has jewelry as a way of declaring kind of like, this is who I am, this is what I like, this is my identity, this is what I'm about. And so that desire to be seen is so universal. That desire for decoration, for enhancement, for elevating your appearance is universal. So I found that part of it really interesting. Now, some of the other things that I sort of stumbled on at the British Museum that I thought were really interesting were things like the fact that spinners and weavers were buried with their spinning and weaving tools. So weavers were buried with their shuttles, and spinners were buried with their spindles and spindle whorls. Unfortunately, one of the things that I discovered also is that none of those textiles lasted. So in all of these museums and all of these exhibits, like tapestry departments were kind of closed down for maintenance. There was not a lot of actual cloth that survives hundreds and hundreds of years. There was maybe like the hand-woven linen that wrapped the mummies that were in the exhibit in the British Museum, but otherwise there's not a lot of actual textiles, just the textile tools. So my husband's pick in London for the thing to do was to go to the British Museum. Now, my pick for the thing to do was to visit this little tiny retail outlet called Wallace Sewell. Now, if you have been following my blog for a while, you might know that I stumbled on this little tiny retail shop back in 2007. And this weaving design company, Wallace Sewell, is what made me want to become a weaver. And I have been a massive fan of this business, their methodology, their design process, literally everything for years. And so I went, so I brought my family to this little retail store so that they could have a bit more of an idea of what I'm talking about or what I'm thinking about or what is interesting to me. I'm glad they came. But it was the strangest feeling. I arrived at the store and was kind of fangirling the store and just kind of stood there absorbing everything, sort of the colors and the yarn, the textures, the blocks of design, like all of it. Pretty much the only thing that I bought in London besides pastries was these two scarves. So this is one of the scarves that I bought. It is basically appears to be woven this way on the loom. And so the warp is sort of all of these beautiful stripes of color. And then the scarf is basically woven maybe like, it's about 10 inches, maybe less than 10 inches of weft to make the scarf, and then it's cut. So it's basically not woven lengthwise on the loom, but widthwise on the loom. And you can see that the pattern that goes in here, the weave structure, allows the weft to show differently on the two sides of the scarf. So these are the kinds of things that I find fascinating about the work that they've created. So this is one of the scarves, and you can see it's a very, very short scarf. So when you wrap it, it's a very short scarf. It's basically just like that. And then the second scarf that I got, this one is wool, and it appears to have been woven lengthwise on the loom, but it looks like there were multiple scarves woven next to each other, and they were cut in between the scarves to separate them. But you can see that there's kind of like a 2-block design going here. There's something happening here, there's something happening here, and that is creating the two different sides of the design on this particular scarf. So these are the two things that I bought for myself in London, and I absolutely love them. They just provide so much inspiration to me and so many ideas, and yeah, that's basically all I wanted in London. We also made our way to Bath, which is a small town west of London, and I wanted the kids to have an experience of taking the train and going someplace outside of London. And even though I haven't seen the show, I've been told that Bridgerton is filmed in Bath. And there's also a scene from Les Mis where Russell Crowe is standing on a bridge, and that bridge is also in Bath. And so that is all the Bath trivia that I have. Now, in the town of Bath, there are 2 yarn stores. The yarn shop that I was aiming to visit is a shop called A Yarn Story. Now, I've known the owner of Yarn Story, Carmen, for a long time now. So 10 years ago, when I was invited to teach in Brighton, which is on the south coast of the UK, at the end of one of my talks about color stories, Carmen came up to chat, and she told me she just found this great space in Bath, and she was about to open a yarn shop, and it was all going to be about the idea of color and yarn stories. There was a couple of years where Carmen actually helped work in our booth for SweetGeorgia at H&H Cologne, and she worked together with Alison Thistlewood from Champagne in Kvyat. Now, Carmen was our German translator during those years. So of course, if we were going to go visit Bath, then I was for sure going to go visit A Yarn Story. So Carmen's shop is a gorgeous yarn shop. I don't think I've ever seen this much spin cycle in one place.
Yeah, we get that a lot, actually.
Yeah. So it's all the same colorway dyed,
Yep.
but then when it spins up looking totally different. That is so cool.
Yeah.
That looks amazing. She's also created her own line of yarns called Walcott yarns, named after the area of Bath that she's located in. But the colors are all actually inspired by her roots in the Pacific Northwest. So she had 3 different yarns that I looked at. There was one that was an alpaca blend, and then there was a second one that is a Peruvian wool that would be good for us. It's like a great sweater yarn. And then the third is like a thicker, fluffier yarn that would sub well for any sweater where you need to hold both like a fuzzy yarn and a fingering weight yarn together. So I have actually been wanting to knit a couple of hats for myself this fall, so I bought a couple of skeins. I bought these 3 skeins to knit together with my hand spun yarn, so maybe make 3 different hats. This yarn is called Opus, and it is a blend of 70% Argentinian merino, 30% baby alpaca, and 100% awesome, is what it says. So these are some of my favorite colors right now. They're all kind of like these deep autumn colors. This is Cinnabar, this one is called Goldenrod, and this one is called Plum. So these are all my favorite colors right now. And the yarn is amazingly soft. Yeah, this yarn is super soft, really, really lovely, but this is Walcott Yarns Opus. And she also gave me this nice pin with the logo from A Yarn Story. So I had also hoped to visit one of the machine knitting studios in the UK on this trip, but they were all too far outside of sort of like a comfortable travel radius. And I didn't really want the kids to sit on the tube for an hour just so that I could buy some coned yarn. So I'm just gonna have to go back to London another time. Finally, one of my absolute favorite spots in London is the Tate Modern. It's a museum for modern art, and it's located right near the Millennium Bridge. And years ago, I fell in love with this museum because they have a massive room full of Mark Rothko paintings. It's actually called the Rothko Room. And it was a very moody, dark room with these huge, dark red paintings that he originally painted for a restaurant at the Four Seasons in New York City. But he later decided that the restaurant would not be the best place for those paintings, and so he pulled the paintings from the commission and then gave them or presented them to the Tate Modern. Now, years ago, being in that Rothko room, it was one of those moments where I realized how much color can affect your mood and your experience of life. And I really, really wanted the kids to experience that room too. But unfortunately, when we arrived at the museum, all those paintings were on tour elsewhere. So instead, we ended up seeing an exhibit from a different artist. And this other artist had basically created like a wall or like a curtain of rocks that had been suspended by metal wire. And it was really beautiful. And the kids were standing there and looking at it and really thinking, oh, it's beautiful, but what does it mean? And the same artist had a piece where a yellow rectangle was painted on the wall, and then a metal bed frame was hung from one corner with a meat hook. And then the question was, well, What does that mean? And then finally, the third piece, which was also by the same artist, really struck me. And it was door framed, and the whole frame was filled with bricks. And I really liked that piece, actually. I think for me, that experience was really exploring this idea that art and aesthetics has meaning because we say it does. Art has value because the artist says so, or because we say so. It's just because we say so. This pile of bricks is worth looking at because someone said so. The exploration of ideas is interesting because someone said so. So if I was the artist, I'm saying that this is valuable. I'm saying this is worth your attention. I'm saying you should come and look at this thing that I have created because it has meaning. And so things have meaning because I say so. So at the end of this trip, I came home feeling weirdly empowered. And that is that making beautiful things, whether it's an intricate lock and key, or if it's a piece of jewelry, or it's a tapestry, all of it is valuable and worthwhile simply because it's something that the artist wants to make and because the artist says it's meaningful. That's all it takes. Basically, do it because you want to, and it's important because you say so. That's it. At the end of the day, I have no expectation that anything that I have made with my own two hands will end up in a gallery or a museum. I am one person out of 8 billion people. So whether or not things that I make are meaningful or important are only meaningful or important because I like them and because I say so. So that is basically a recap of our trip to London and the things that I learned out of that experience of looking at other people's creativity, looking at things that other people have made and what it can show me about what I'm making and what I'm creating. Our kids will never be this age again. So even if we come back a year or two from now, the whole experience is going to be different. So I'm so glad that we did this now. It is absolutely a mind-expanding experience to travel to a place that has so much history and culture and energy. And I am reminded again and again about how, as a creative person, I need to go outside and to see other things. I need to look at things that people have imagined and executed because ideas will ignite something in you. And then I will share my excitement and my inspiration with you, and then maybe you'll find something in all of this that might inspire you too. So travel is all about sharing and spreading ideas from all different cultures and all different places, and we can all learn and grow from that experience. So that is basically it for this week. I would love for you to tell me about your favorite place to travel to. Where have you gone that is good for exploring more about knitting or weaving or textiles or whatever? Where do you find the most inspiration? I would love to hear about it in the comments below. You can also find me on the Discord channel for Sweet Georgia to chat more about your favorite places to find inspiration. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye for now.